The eternal criterion dropped out of faster-than-light travel with the kind of graceful precision that only a Dominion warship of its class could manage. Commander Vrethik of the Selhuri stood on the elevated command platform and watched through the wide observation deck as the blue and green world materialized against the black canvas of space. It was, he admitted to himself privately, a genuinely beautiful planet. The kind of world that made even hardened military commanders pause for a breath. "Commander," said Navigation Officer Peth from his curved console station below, his twin tails flicking with professional alertness. "We have achieved standard observation orbit. Altitude, 412 kilometers. Planetary rotation consistent with previous survey data. Good." Vrethik clasped his four-fingered hands behind his back and studied the planet. "Begin standard first contact protocols. Hail them on all frequency bands. Let them know the Galactic Dominion comes in peace." It was, of course, not entirely true. The Dominion came in assessment. Peace was the word they used when a species was deemed useful. Something else happened when they were not. Vrethik had performed planetary assessments 14 times in his career. Humanity, the species that called this world Earth, was classified as a Class 3 developing civilization. Primitive interplanetary capability, moderate industrial output, significant internal conflict, high emotional volatility. They had been under passive surveillance for 230 years, monitored by deep space observation drones that recorded everything without ever being detected. The humans had no idea they were being watched. They never did, Commander. Communications specialist Darren's voice broke the comfortable silence with a sharp edge. "That did not belong there. I am receiving no response to our hails." Vrethik turned slowly. "Try again. It is possible their technology cannot yet isolate our signal frequency. I have tried every recorded human communication band, Commander. Radio, microwave, digital, satellite relay, all of it." Darren looked up from her console, and there was something in her large amber eyes that Vrethik had not seen there before. Uncertainty. "There is nothing. The planet is completely silent." Vrethik descended the command platform steps and walked to her station himself. He looked at the readout screens, at the flat lines where signals should have been spiking with the constant chatter of an 8 billion person civilization. No news broadcasts, no military communications, no commercial satellite traffic, no internet noise, nothing at all. Just the soft, empty hiss of a planet that had forgotten how to speak. "Life sign scan," Vrethik ordered, his voice carefully controlled. "Full spectrum, every continent." Science lead Orvan was already working. The Selhuri scientist was one of the best biological detection specialists in the Dominion fleet, capable of isolating the biosignature of a single organism on a planet from orbit. He worked in silence for a long moment, his forearms moving across different scanner arrays simultaneously, cross-referencing, recalibrating, checking and checking again. "Commander," Orvan said finally. His voice was very quiet. "I am reading no human life signatures." The bridge went absolutely still. "Repeat that," Vrethik said. "0 human biosignatures detected on the planetary surface. 0 in low orbit. 0 on their lunar installation." Orvan turned from his console, and he looked genuinely shaken, an unusual expression on a species not known for visible emotion. "Commander, there are no humans on Earth." Vrethik stared at him for 3 full seconds. Then he looked back at the planet hanging peacefully in space. Blue oceans glittering in the light of the yellow star. White clouds drifting in slow, graceful spirals. 8 billion people, gone. "Take us lower," he said. "I want to see this for myself." The eternal criterion descended to a low observation altitude of 60 kilometers. Low enough that the surface details resolved into sharp clarity on the enhanced viewing screens. What they saw made the silence on the bridge even heavier. The cities were intact. New York rose from its island in a familiar cluster of glass and steel towers, its streets laid out in their grid pattern, bridges spanning the rivers, traffic lights cycling through their rotations for an audience of empty asphalt. London's ancient skyline stood unchanged. Shanghai's towers caught the early morning light and threw it back in silver ribbons. Nairobi, Sao Paulo, Mumbai, Tokyo, every major population center on the planet appeared undamaged. Undisturbed and completely, impossibly empty, vehicles are present on road surfaces. Orvan reported as he processed the visual feeds. Power grids are operational. Interior building lighting is functioning. Water treatment facilities appear to be running on automated systems. Agricultural irrigation is active in several regions. He paused. Commander, this planet looks like it is waiting for its people to come back. Or like they left in a hurry, Darren said softly, and then pressed her lips together as if she regretted saying it aloud. Vrethik had been thinking the same thing. I want a ground team, he said. Full environmental suits. 6 personnel. We are landing in the city the humans called Geneva. Their records show it housed multiple international coordination facilities. If there are answers to be found, they will be there. The streets of Geneva were immaculate and lifeless. Vrethik walked through them with his team and felt the wrongness of it pressing against his skin. Like a physical force. Cafes sat with chairs still pulled out from tables, cups half full of cold liquid, pastries turning stale in display cases. A child's wheeled vehicle lay on its side in a park, a colorful flag still spinning slowly in the morning breeze. A dog, a brown and white one, watched them from a doorway with calm, curious eyes. The only living thing they had seen on the entire planet's surface, that there were no bodies, no blood, no signs of panic or struggle, no indication of plague or warfare, no radiation, no chemical residue, nothing that suggested violence of any kind. Humanity had not been destroyed. It had simply left. The International Coordination Facility, a long, low building of glass and concrete near the old lake, was still powered. Screens glowed in empty offices. Computers hummed over abandoned desks. Darren, who had come down with the ground team specifically to work with human communication systems, sat at a central terminal and began carefully working through the archived transmissions. She found the last global broadcast 18 minutes later. Commander, she said, and her voice was strange. You need to hear this. She played it through her suit's external speaker, and Vrethik stood in the silent office and listened to the last thing humanity had said to itself before vanishing from the face of its world. Attention all citizens of Earth. Operation Ascension is now active. This is not a drill. All personnel report to designated departure coordinates within 4 hours. Military units, you are already deployed. Civilian coordination officers will guide family groups to ascension points. Do not bring unnecessary items. Do not delay. This is the moment we have prepared for. Every human life is accounted for in the plan. Trust the plan. Move now. The message had played on a continuous loop for 6 hours. Broadcast simultaneously in every human language across every communication channel on the planet. And then it had stopped, and the planet had gone quiet. Vrethik listened to it twice. Then he stood in the empty office with its glowing screens and its humming computers and thought about the words very carefully. The moment we have prepared for, every human life is accounted for in the plan. Military units, you are already deployed. Orvan, he said through the suit communicator. The launch signatures your team identified from orbit. I need precise numbers. There was a brief pause from the science officer still aboard the ship. Commander, we have now cataloged the thermal remnants from 847,000 separate launch events distributed across every continent on the planet. The sites are consistent with vessels of significant scale. Minimum estimated length per vessel, 4 kilometers. Maximum estimated length. Some sites suggest considerably larger. Vrethik closed his eyes for exactly 2 seconds. 847,000 ships, each one potentially 4 kilometers long or more, launched within the past several weeks from a civilization the Dominion had classified as barely capable of reaching its own moon. Vrethik to Eternal Criterion, he said, his voice absolutely steady. Prepare a Priority 1 transmission to Dominion Command. Code Omega. He looked around the empty office one more time, at the screens, at the spinning chair where some human coordinator had sat until very recently, at the last message still glowing on one terminal. Tell them that humanity is not on Earth. Tell them that humanity did not disappear. He picked up a small framed photograph from the desk, a human family, smiling, standing somewhere with mountains in the background, and set it carefully back down. Tell them that humanity mobilized." The dog in the doorway watched him with calm brown eyes as he walked back out into the empty street. And somewhere above the clouds, the eternal Criterion began composing a message that would send tremors of genuine fear through every council chamber in the Galactic Dominion. They called it the Long Secret, and it had begun not with a government decree or a military order, but with a single engineer named Dr. Yael Ostrov who, on a Tuesday morning in the year 2043, was reviewing deep space telescope data in a research facility in the Negev desert, and noticed something that should not have been there. It was a drone, a small one by cosmic standards, roughly the size of a city bus, in a stable orbit just beyond Mars, designed with extraordinary care to mimic the visual and radar signature of natural space debris. It had been there, her subsequent analysis revealed, for at least 60 years. It was broadcasting compressed data packages at irregular intervals toward a point deep in the galactic arm. It was without any question not human-made. Dr. Ostrov did not panic. She did not call a press conference. She was a methodical woman who had spent 30 years learning to think carefully before acting. She documented everything, encrypted it using a personal cipher, and then spent 3 weeks quietly confirming what she had found before she called anyone at all. The person she called was not her department head or her government. She called her oldest friend, who happened to be the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. That call lasted for hours, and when it ended, the long secret had begun. What followed was the most extraordinary act of collective human discipline in the history of the species. Within 18 months, a secret council had been formed, representatives from every nation on Earth, operating under the deepest classification protocols ever devised. They called themselves the Ascension Committee, and their singular purpose was simple to state and staggering to execute. Prepare humanity to leave, not to flee, not to hide, to mobilize. Because Dr. Ostrov's discovery had led to others, the Deep Space Telescope Network, quietly redirected and expanded in secret over the following years, had revealed the full shape of what humanity was dealing with. The Galactic Dominion was real, vast, and methodical. It had been watching Earth for over 2 centuries. Its pattern, decoded from intercepted transmissions with agonizing patience over decades, was clear and consistent. It assessed civilizations, it categorized them, and then it arrived to either incorporate them as client species, useful, obedient, stripped of autonomy, or it found other uses for their worlds. The record of what happened to civilizations that resisted was not ambiguous. Humanity had perhaps 20 to 30 years before a Dominion assessment vessel arrived, maybe less. The committee worked with that number and built everything else around it. The shipbuilding program, codenamed Project Deep Blue, began in 2051 and operated simultaneously across every ocean on Earth, and in vast underground facilities carved into bedrock on every continent. The scale of it was almost incomprehensible. Not hundreds of ships, not thousands. The committee's military planners, working from what they could decode of Dominion fleet compositions and engagement doctrine, had determined that a meaningful deterrent, something the Dominion would recognize as a genuine threat rather than a gesture, required a minimum of 500,000 combat vessels. So that is what they built. The technology came from everywhere at once. The global unification the long secret created was unlike anything in human history, because it was not driven by ideology or conflict, but by the shared understanding of a clock that was running. Every major research institution on Earth quietly redirected significant resources. Breakthroughs in energy generation, materials science, and propulsion that would have taken centuries in normal development were achieved in decades, because the entire species was, secretly, working on the same problem. Fusion drives matured. Inertial dampening systems were engineered from theoretical foundations. Directed energy weapons were refined through generations of quiet testing in the deep ocean trenches, and inside hollowed mountains where no Dominion surveillance drone could see. The shipyard workers knew what they were building. The engineers knew. The military personnel who trained in sealed facilities knew. The politicians who funded it through a web of misdirected budgets knew. By the end, hundreds of millions of humans knew, and not one of them had broken the secret, because every single one of them understood what was at stake. They had one chance, one moment when humanity could transform from a target into something the Dominion had never encountered, a prepared enemy. Admiral Sarah Kane had been born in Lagos in 2057, 6 years after Project Deep Blue began, and she had known the shape of her life's purpose from the age of 15 when her mother, a naval engineer working on the suboceanic construction platforms, had taken her to see one of the ships. She could still see it clearly in her memory, the vast curve of the hull rising from the deep water, 5 kilometers of dark composite alloy that had no business existing yet did, because humanity had decided it would. She had stood on a service platform with her mother's hand on her shoulder and looked up at the scale of it and felt something settle permanently into place inside her chest. She had spent the next 4 decades becoming the best warship commander alive, and then the best fleet coordinator, and then the architect of Operation Ascension itself, the plan to move every human being on Earth off the planet simultaneously, link them with the fleet, and arrive in Dominion space not as refugees or rebels, but as an organized military force, with a message that could not be ignored. The departure had taken 6 weeks of coordinated precision that would have seemed impossible to anyone who had not watched humanity spend 80 years, becoming quietly extraordinary. 8 billion people moved through a network of ascension points. The humans themselves called them portals, though they were considerably more complex, to fleet assembly coordinates on the dark side of 3 different star systems. Over a light year from Earth, the planet was left intact, powered, tended by automated systems, not abandoned, set aside, preserved. Earth was the return address, not the grave. Vrethic's Priority 1 transmission reached Dominion Command 17 hours after he sent it. The response took 6 more hours to arrive, because the High Council needed that long to stop arguing and actually compose one. It contained new orders and a great deal of language that Vrethic privately recognized as panic dressed in formal phrasing. He was still in orbit around the silent blue planet, still trying to fully comprehend what he had stumbled into, when Darren spoke from her station in a voice that had gone very quiet and very careful. "Commander, long-range sensors are picking up incoming vessels. Dominion response fleet?" Vrethic asked. "No, Commander." Darren turned slowly in her seat. "The configuration does not match any Dominion vessel class. The configuration does not match anything in our database." She looked at her screens again, and when she looked back at him, Vrethic saw something new in her amber eyes, the thing that came just before fear when a mind was still trying to decide whether fear was the right response. "They are coming from 3 separate vectors simultaneously. Long-range count." As she stopped. "Darren, still counting, Commander. The number keeps going up." She pressed her hand flat against the console as if she needed the physical contact to steady herself. "We are looking at hundreds of thousands of vessels, all moving in coordinated formation, all on intercept vectors for Dominion core space." The main screen flickered, and then it was filled with a face, a human face. Smooth brown skin, short gray-streaked hair, dark eyes that held the particular quality of someone who had been patient for a very long time and had now finished being patient. "Commander Vrethic of the Selhurry," the human said, and her voice was calm and even and carried the absolute weight of someone who had spent her entire life preparing to say exactly this. "I am Admiral Sarah Kane of the Unified Earth Fleet. I know you have been watching our world for over 100 years. I know what the Dominion does with civilizations it considers primitive." The slight emphasis on that last word was precise and deliberate. "We want you to understand something clearly before this conversation goes any further." She paused for exactly the right amount of time. "We did not disappear. We did not run. We did not panic." Her eyes held the camera without blinking. "We mobilized, and we have been waiting for this conversation for 83 years. Vrethic stood on the bridge of the Eternal Criterion and looked at the face of the human admiral on his screen, and behind her, just barely visible through the viewport of whatever vessel she was broadcasting from, he could see the shapes of ships, ship after ship after ship, stretching back into the dark in numbers that made his mind refuse the mathematics. For the first time in his career, Vrethic understood precisely how every civilization that had ever seen a Dominion fleet appear in their sky must have felt. He understood it because he was feeling it himself. He pressed the transmission key and opened a channel back to Dominion Command. And the message he sent this time contained no formal language at all. They are here, all of them, and they brought everything.